Welcome, everyone, to another episode of DarshanTalks. We have Dr. Kate Merton with us. Kate has been intimately involved in the entire innovation process. She has worked in, shall we say, huge, massive biopharma, if that's the technical term for it. And she is now changing lives in a different way. And I'm going to let Kate explain more of what that is before we pull her into a conversation about HCPs or healthcare practitioners.
This is the DarshanTalks podcast, regulatory guy, irregular podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at DarshanTalks or the show's website at DarshanTalks.com.
Kate, go ahead.
So Kate Merton, currently I am the head of commercial for Navigate Biopharma, which is a clinical diagnostics assay company. We are actually a subsidiary of Novartis. And in a prior life, I'm a pharmacologist. That's what my PhD's in. I helped to discover drugs, get them approved in clinical trials, and also worked on the commercial side of the business to try and make sure that the right patients got the right drugs.
And when you said the right patients got the right drugs, if I remember correctly, Kate, you actually landed up working with groups that interacted directly with physicians, pharmacists, and the like. Is that fair?
Yep, I held a couple of roles which had me working with field teams that did just that.
So here's the real question. We're reaching a world where we've got pharmacogenomics, we're getting tons of data, and as we're getting this data, as HCPs, as healthcare practitioners, and again, for those of you who don't remember, I'm a pharmacist by training as well as being an attorney who does FDA regulatory law. But the key piece that I'm stressing on is I have never, ever looked at a pharmacogenomic test to decide what is the appropriate treatment for a patient. What we did typically is start a patient on a dose and then escalate or decelerate, if you will, de-escalate the drug dose depending on the patient's response. Why would I go to doing pharmacogenomic testing? What value does that have for me?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm going to give too basic an answer, but I'm sure you'll correct me if I am. I'm lucky enough to know a number of physicians. All of those physicians went into the business because they wanted to help people. Mm-hmm. That means that they are going to help people given the best information available to them. Pharmacogenomics provides them information to make a better initial decision about the patient. If they have information put in front of them that says, hey, this person's a high metabolizer, you need to be careful or you need to change the dose, that gives them a better way to start that patient off. It's going to be better for them. If I was a physician, I wouldn't be like, no, I don't want that information. They absolutely do want that. Now, I think for certain drug classes, there's more information available. For certain patients, there might be more information available. But if it is there, a physician who wants to make people better is going to use the best information available to them at that moment, including pharmacogenomics data.
But then here's my question as someone who's worked in clinical pharmacy in a variety of fields. My big question is, does that only make sense for expensive drugs, or does that make sense for a Coumadin or something that's very cheap? What's your take on that?
So sometimes it's about the cost of the drug. Now, is it, a drug that costs $50,000 a year because it's a biologic? Then yes, you're probably going to want to make the right dose decision early on with pharmacogenomics. But also, I would argue that even if it's a drug that costs you a few cents, but perhaps there's a lot of monitoring that goes into it, for example, with Coumadin, then you're also going to be long-term financially better off if you were looking at the pharmacogenomic data. But, financially, I would vote comes second to what is best for the patient. Making sure that patient is on the right drug as quick as possible is better for them, better for quality of life. And, from an economic perspective, that then goes on and impacts a bunch of other things. So it's not only why an HCP should care about getting you on the right drug, right dose, right time. That's why a payer should care about it as well. And also, it's a no-brainer for the patient. They don't say, oh yeah, please put me on the wrong drug for a little bit and let's test it out. They're going to say, hey, if you've got the right information in front of you, make the best decision for me.
But here's the question. How often is that really going to impact care? And what I mean by that is this going to land up raising the cost of healthcare because the drug itself might have minimal cost, and you're talking about a 2 to 3 day escalation, de-escalation pace?
I see what you mean. Okay, yeah. So I think that there's recently, and I can't quote the author on this one, but I have read that there is a number of studies that have come out that have shown if you introduce this kind of information, does it change the cost of treatment for a patient? And the last one I read, it actually showed that there actually was no benefit. So it didn't like decrease the cost, but then again, it didn't make it more expensive, which was the initial fear that having the test done first of all was going to be expensive. You're going to have people making more intricate treatment plans versus the ones that are, you know, quite appropriately defined by society and their guidelines. The last economic studies have come out that right now it doesn't make any difference. And that's only a few years into this whole industry. You know, we're 10 years in. I'd say with the advancement in technology and better understanding of each individual, when we move not just from like pharmacogenomics, but to precision medicine, I think that's where we're going to see the economic benefit. But right now, I don't think it actually ends up costing us any more. I think it just helps us make the better decision for the same amount of money.
Now, let me ask you this question. Is it a better decision necessarily, or is it more information towards making a better decision? What I mean by that is, to me, pharmacogenomics becomes yet another brick in a wall of information. When I hear people say that, you know what, if you get this pharmacogenomic information, you'll make a better dosing decision. Most dosing nomograms don't consider that, number one. And number two, it suggests that these doses are based on the idea that it's probably the most important factor in deciding what your dose is. Is that, am I misinterpreting the information as I understand it?
I wouldn't, I think depending upon the indication and the drug you are looking at, some pharmacogenetic tests may make no difference. You know, you're going to base the dosage based upon the size of the patient and other things, because their genetics is going to come back and say, yeah, they're absolutely good to go. So no, you won't see a value perhaps in a majority of patients, but in certain indications, say in oncology, when you are time limited to make sure that patient gets on the right drug, then it becomes incredibly important. Also, let's look at that patient that does have a genetic abnormality, and if you dose them wrong, you know, something's going to go horribly wrong. That's when it is incredibly important. So yes, I think that there is the argument that for some drugs in the majority of patients, perhaps it's going to be overkill. But if you ask me, you know, the parent of 3 children, if I had the chance to have that test done when my child receives a drug, just to double check that they're not that 1% outlier, I would do it every time.
So who should pay for that?
Well, right now, I am lucky enough to be insured, but I do not believe that payer covers it right now. So it then comes down to me. Like we do not, sadly, live in a perfect world, and everyone gets to make their independent decisions. Now, again, depending upon what might actually be wrong with my child, would I find the money to make sure that she got that test and got the right drug at the right time? Yes, I would, and I would be happy to cover the cost. Would I hope that in the future it's going to be seen as such an overall population health economic benefit that a payer or the government does it? I would hope that it does.
Okay. Well, thank you again. Any last thoughts on this topic, Kate?
Very interesting topic. Happy to answer any more of your questions.
Well, we'll sort of put your contact information if people want to reach out, or at least have some way of reaching out to you. And stay tuned, everyone. There's going to be more coming. Thanks again, Kate.
This is the DarshanTalks podcast, regulatory guy, irregular podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at DarshanTalks or the show's website at DarshanTalks.com.